everyone, welcome to my channel, Patterns by Dee. My name is Dee and today's tutorial is on the crazy cute two-piece top and pleated skirt. Now, before we get into the tutorial, please hit that subscribe button and that notification bell for upcoming videos and tutorials. Okay, the fabric that I chose for this tutorial was a stretch ombre denim. I purchased from Joann's a year ago, so I think this was a great pick for the pattern for this tutorial. Now, the fabrics that would work well with this pattern are any type of denim. If it's a light, medium, or heavyweight denim, you can use a crepe, a poplin, a viscose blend, a linen blend, cotton twill, or a tweed. When it comes to attaching your spaghetti straps to the front and the back bodice, make sure that you do a muslin or a test fit before you straight stitch your straps permanently on the front and the back bodice, because you can make the straps shorter or longer depending how tight or how loose you want them. So with further ado, let's get started. And also make sure you use a crayon or a color pencil to indicate what size you need to cut out and where you need to place your markings for your buttons and also your dart on the side bust and also your notches. This is pattern piece number 1, which is the front bodice. You're going to have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric and also 2 pieces of lining. Okay, pattern piece number 2, which is the back bodice. You have to cut 1 piece of fabric on the fold. Also cut out 1 piece of lining on the fold. Pattern piece number 3, which is the bodice peplum. You have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric on the fold and cut out 1 interfacing on the fold. That's if you want your peplum piece to have a stiffer stability. Okay, pattern piece number 4, which is the shoulder strap. You will have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric. A pattern piece number 5, which is the front left side of the skirt. You will have to cut out 1 piece of fabric, also cut out 1 piece of lining. Now, you're going to see some markings on the very top of each skirt piece, and they look like T's on the top of your skirt between the inside fold line. Now, these markings indicate where you need to bring the fabric together to make the pleat. So you will have to insert a pin in between the T to the fabric and you're going to make a marking at that pin, because that will indicate where you need to place your fabrics together to fold to make the pleat. You're also going to make markings on your lining pieces for your hook and eyes at the front left side of the skirt and as well as the front right side of the skirt. Pattern piece number 6 is the back of the skirt. You're going to have to cut 1 piece of fabric and also cut out 1 piece of lining. Pattern piece number 7, which is the right side of the skirt. You will have to cut out 1 piece of fabric and also cut out 1 piece of lining as well. Pattern piece number 8, which is the back skirt waistband for WB for waistband. You're going to have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric and also cut out 1 interfacing. Pattern piece number 9, which is the left side skirt waistband. You're going to have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric and cut out 1 piece of interfacing. Pattern piece number 10, which is the right side skirt waistband. You're going to have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric and cut out 1 piece of interfacing. And this side is for the belt flap placement. Pattern piece number 11, which is this piece here, this little square. This is for the belt buckle flap. Now, this is included for all sizes. You're going to have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric or cut out 2 pieces of leather. Now, I cut out 2 pieces of leather and just adhered them together with wrong sides facing. And I also cut off the seam allowance because I'm just going to only place this in the box on my fabric instead of adding the seam allowance, the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I'm just going to make a detail around the flap with a straight stitch. Now, this flap is for an opening of 1.5 inch belt buckle, which I have here. And this is 1.5 inch wide. So it'll fit right in between this belt buckle. Now, if you get a belt buckle that doesn't have this piece here, this is where this little hole right here is for. It's for the whole, I'm not sure what this piece is called, but it goes, I'm going to show you, I'm going to demonstrate it to you here, where this goes in between, as you see here, okay? Now, if you have this extra bar here, this is where the strap will go. And you won't need this little opening hole here at all. So, but make sure you purchase 1.5 inch wide belt buckle to insert your belt buckle flap. Pattern piece number 12. This is the keeper loop, which is the belt loop for your belt buckle. Now, this is for all sizes. You will have to cut out one piece of fabric or cut out one piece of leather. Now, I cut out one piece of leather and I put adhesive and I folded in 3/8 of an inches on both sides. And then I pressed it flat. Now, I'm going to take these staples and put both ends together and put the staple in between so it'll stay together. So I'll demonstrate this to you when it's time to work on the buckle loop. Pattern piece number 13. This is for all sizes and it's the belt flap. You will have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric or cut out 2 pieces of leather. And like I did with the belt buckle flap, I adhered both pieces together with wrong sides facing. And I'm going to do a little bit of a detail on the edge of a straight stitch to give it more of a better look. And I also shortened my belt buckle, my belt flap as well. So.
Okay, now that you have all your pattern pieces cut out and all your markings placed on your fabric, let's start putting it all together.
Now, like you did the fabric of pattern piece number 1, you're going to do the lining the same way. By folding with right sides facing, matching the notches on the side seam of the dart pin, and then also take a pin and put it at the dot so you know where to stop, and start stitching from the side seam all the way up to the dart. Don't back stitch like I said, and tie it twice to secure your stitches. To secure your dart, you're going to start at the side seam at the notches, insert your needle, and you're going to back stitch at the side seam of your dart. And then you're going to stitch all the way up to the top of your dart at the dot. not back stitch at the top of the dart, at the dot. Stitch all the way through, lift up your needle, lift up your pressure foot, pull some thread out to tie your dart, to secure your dart. And you're gonna tie it maybe 2 or 3 times to secure it so it won't unravel. That should be good enough. And you're gonna do the same thing for the lining pieces as well. And then you're going to take your dart and you're going to press it downwards towards the waist of the front bodice. Okay, now that you're going to stay stitch the edge of your dart down at the side seam of your bodice, your front bodice, and you're going to stitch it 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Just like that, and you're going to do that same thing for the other 3 pieces, your other fabric and your lining. Okay, now that you have attached your darts on your fabric pieces and your lining pieces, and also did a stay stitch to attach your dart down using 1/8 of an inch from the edge, we're going to put these aside and work on pattern piece number 2. So pattern piece number 2 is the back bodice. And you don't have any darts for your back bodice. Now, only thing you're going to do is take your fabric pieces for your front bodice, and you're going to attach them on the side seams, matching the notches. You're going to pin at the top and bottom. With right sides facing. Okay, and you're going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both side seams. Now for your fabric pieces of the front and back bodice and the lining pieces, you're going to attach them at the side seams using a 1/2 inch seam allowance stitch. Back stitch once you get to the end and cut your threads. And you're going to press your seams open on the fabric pieces and the lining pieces as well. Let's do the other side. Now I'm right-handed, so I flipped it upside down so I could start at the waist and work my way up towards the underarm of the top. Again with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. stitch. Okay. Now you're going to press your seams open, seams flat, I'm sorry. Just like that. And you're going to do the same thing for the lining. Okay, now that you have pressed your side seams of the front and back bodice together, you press them down, the fabric piece and the lining piece. Let's put these aside and work on pattern piece number 3, which is the bodice peplum piece. Now, you don't have to add this piece if you don't like. The top will do very well and it's very cute without the peplum piece, but I'm just going to demonstrate how you attach your peplum to the front and back of the bodice. So make sure you transferred all your markings, and you're going to take both pieces and lay them on top of each other, right sides facing.
Okay, on the top edge of one of the peplum pieces, you're going to fold down a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the notched edge and press.
With right sides facing. And at that dot, starting at that dot, we're going to stitch all the way around to the other dot. But first, let's pin. All right, let's stitch from the dot all the way around to the other dot. And starting at the dot, we're going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance to the other side. Insert your needle at that dot, back stitch, Okay, now we're going to trim some of the excess seam allowance off, and I would trim 1/4 inch off. Okay, now that we have pressed our peplum pieces together, we're going to start on pattern piece number 4, which is the pattern piece number 4, which is the shoulder strap. Fold the strap with right sides facing and stitch down on the edge
1/4 inch seam allowance.
And then you will turn the piece wrong sides together. You're going to fold it in half with right sides together. Pull your pressure foot down. Stitch all the way down. Okay, now that you've stitched your strap down, we're going to take, I have this hook that I always insert into any strap that I'm making, and I hook it at the end of the corner so I can bring it through. Okay. Now you're going to press it flat, and then we'll attach it to the front and the back of my body, the bodice top. Okay, now that we have turned our straps inside out, now we're going to take our front and back pieces of the bodice, the lining and the fabric, and now we're going to attach the straps. So with right sides facing, let's turn this over, and at the very top of the top of your bodice, you're going to see 2 notches here and here on the edge of the top and the back. Okay, this is the back and this is the front. So you're going to have a notch here and a notch here. Now you're going to take your pieces with right sides facing, and you're going to turn them over here. Turn them around like this, and you're going to put them flat towards, going towards the center front of that line, of that notch line. So right here on the notch line on the front of your bodice, you're going to lay it here, a 1/2 inch from the edge. You're going to pin, and you're going to come around just like this, because the seam of the strap, I always place it at the seam of the underarm, and I wrap it all the way around to the other side, and I'm going to lay that strap right on the side facing the center back now, because we're on the center back of it, and then we're going to pin. Okay, do that for the other side as well. Take your strap, face it with the seam of the strap towards the underarm, pin it the outside of the notch, not in the inside, on the outside, on the closer towards the center front. And you're going to turn it just like this and pin it again closer towards the center back. And you're going to pin. Okay. Now we're going to lay the lining over top of it, right sides facing. And you're going to match the notches for the back. You're going to pin.
Now do a test fit before you stitch your straps down permanently to make sure if it's the right length that you would like them to be.
And you're going to match the strap is away from inside the side seam. You're going to stitch all the way from the front, center front to the top, around the armhole, to the back, around the other armhole. Make sure your strap is out of the way when you stitch it. From the strap into the other side of the waist. We're going to leave this open under here so we can flip it inside out. Okay? Do that, come back, and we'll continue.
Okay, now you're going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around to the other side of the bodice, but you're going to leave the very bottom waist edge open so you can flip it wrong sides facing, and then we're going to press it.
Come at the very top, pivot at the dot. At the edge of the strap. Stop your needle, lift your pressure foot up, and pivot. Be careful not to stitch down the strap. Get that out of the way. Lift your pressure foot up, pivot again. Now you're going to turn it inside out to make sure the straps are to your liking of the length. Okay, so let's try it on now.
Now the straps are to my liking, so I'm going to turn it right sides facing and cut some of the seam allowance off. Then I'm going to turn it back and press. Now I'm trimming the seam allowance with my peaking shears, but you can use regular shears for this as well. Okay, once your straps are to your liking, you're going to press your bodice flat and also pin your waist edge so you can edge stitch it down 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Okay, now when attaching your pattern piece number 3, which is the bodice peplum, you're going to attach it just like you would a collar. So with right sides facing, you're going to take your peplum piece and match the notches with the side seam of the bodice. And you're going to pin that all the way across before you stitch it down using a 1/2 inch seam allowance.
Okay, now that we have top stitched or stitched in the ditch or slip stitched the bodice to the peplum closed, now we're going to put this aside and work on pattern pieces 5, 6, and 7 of the skirt. Okay, now we're going to pin the side seams of pattern pieces number 5 and pattern pieces number 7 to pattern piece number 6, matching the numbers. 1 on the left side and 2 on the right side. And you're going to do this for the main pieces of the fabric and also the lining pieces. And you're going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, by attaching the side seams of the skirt pieces, pattern piece number 5, number 6, and number 7, you're going to follow the numbers 1 for the left side and number 2 for the right side at the side seams. You're going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance for the fabric pieces and also the lining pieces. So for the fabric and the lining pieces at the side seams, press your seams flat. Now with your seams pressed, you're going to match the fabric and the lining together with right sides facing, and then you're going to pin on the left, the bottom, and the right sides of the skirt. You're going to leave the top open because you're going to have to turn that inside out with the wrong sides facing, and then you're going to trim your seam allowance to 1/4 inch. Now start at the top of your skirt on the top side and stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the sides across the bottom to the other side. Once you get to the bottom, stop a 1/2 inch from the edge. Put your pressure foot up and pivot. Now you're going to trim your corners, and you can also trim the seam allowance or leave it as is. But I'm going to trim the corners and turn it wrong sides together, and then I'm going to press. Now you're going to trim off 1/4 inch from the seam allowance around the skirt. And now turn it inside out with wrong sides facing, wrong sides together, and press. Now with the top edge of the skirt, you're going to do a stay stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Okay, now let's start applying our pleats, starting with the left side of the skirt. And we're going to lay the pleats to the left. So take your first marking on the edge on the left side of your skirt with right sides facing, and at the fold line, which you should have marked it with a notch, fold it over to the other dot and pin. Now here's another fold line here, and here's 2 more dots. You're going to fold them onto each other. So at the fold here, fold line the notch, fold it over the 2 dots, fold it over and place it at the dots. And you're going to pin. Make sure the dots are touching one another. All right, and you're going to keep going all the way across. So the next dot with the inside seam, you're going to fold over to the next dot. to do a stay stitch on the very edge of it all the way across, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now that you have ironed your pleats and you have pinned your pleats down, you're going to stitch across the top close to the edge. You're going to stay stitch 1/8 of an inch, and then you're going to stitch close to the edge of each row of pleats. Down, it's going to be 3 inches to that other marking that you should have marked on your fabric. You're going to stay stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the top of the skirt. I'm going to tack down my pleats by stitching a top stitch on the edge of the pleat 3 inches away from the hem. And back stitch. And I'm going to do that same thing all the way across. Okay, now that you have attached and tacked down the side seam of your pleat on the right sides of the skirt, we're going to put this aside, and now we're going to work on the waistband. So with pattern piece number 8, 9, and 10, we're going to attach at the side seams of the back piece. We're going to attach the pattern piece number 10 on the right side and pattern piece number 9 on the left side with right sides facing. There are 2 pieces of each, so we're going to have to make 2 of the waistbands. And a set of your waistbands should be interfaced. So let's take those pieces and stitch them at the seams, at the side seams. So you're going to stitch the waistbands together at the seams, and you're going to do that for the other piece as well. a 1/2 inch seam allowance down each side. Okay, so now let's do the interface pieces. And we're stitching a 1/2 inch on all sides, all the seams. Okay, now let's press some flat. Okay, now that you have sewn a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the side seams of the skirt waistband pieces, now you're going to fold up a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the main uninterfaced piece of your skirt waistband. Then you're going to place them right sides facing and pin the sides, the top of the waistband to the other side. And then you're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the side to the top of the waistband to the other side. Now you're going to insert your needle at the edge of the seam that's flipped up that you had to press. You're going to start it right there on the edge, a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Back stitch. You're going to lift up your pressure foot and you're going to pivot, and a 1/2 inch from the edge you're going to stitch all the way around. Back stitch at the very end. Okay, now that we have stitched a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the side to the top, across the top to the other side, now we're going to trim some of this excess seam allowance off, and we're going to trim 1/4 inch off. Now you're going to turn it. Let me take some more of this seam allowance off the corner so it could be, so I can have a nice point to it. I'll turn it inside out. Make sure you push out your corners. And now we're going to press this down. Okay, now that you have pressed your skirt waistband flat, you're going to take the pleated skirt piece and with right sides facing of the waistband and the skirt, turn the waistband upside down so the notches that you see can match the pleats of your skirt, and you're going to pin. You're going to stitch across 1/2 inch seam allowance. Back stitch at both ends. Back stitch at the end. Okay, now that you have pressed the top pleated edge of the skirt inside of the waistband, you're going to fold over with the folded side edge of the waistband over the seam allowance of the skirt, matching the side seams, and then you're going to pin all the way across. To close in the skirt inside of the waistband, you can top stitch it, stitch in the seam, or slip stitch the edge of it closed. Okay, this process is for pieces 11, 12, and 13, which are the belt flap, the keeper loop, which is the belt buckle loop, and the buckle flap. You're going to stitch using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on pattern piece number 11. For pattern piece number 12, use 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. For pattern piece number 13, use 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, for pattern pieces 11, 12, and 13, trim the seam allowance and turn them wrong sides together and then press. Okay, to close up your keeper loop or your belt loop, you can use a zigzag stitch. What I'm using is a metal staple. This is for leather or any type of thick upholstery fabric. Okay, now you're going to slip over the keeper loop over top of the belt buckle flap, and then you're going to place the opened side of the belt buckle flap at the markings on your skirt waistband, the side that the belt buckle is supposed to go on. You're going to place the belt buckle flap on the left side of the skirt waistband at the markings, and you're going to pin. Then you're going to stitch a square matching the locations of the dots. Stitching a square shape on top of the belt buckle flap, you're going to start at the dot and stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Now the same way you stitch down the belt buckle flap, you're going to do the same thing for the belt flap, laying the open edge of the belt flap at the dots on the right side of the skirt waistband. Inserting your needle at the dot, you're going to stitch following the other dots, which you're going to make a square. Okay, now we're going to attach our belt buckle. So I have a belt buckle that has a bar at the end of it. So I'm just going to wrap the belt buckle flap around it and then stitch it down. But on the pattern piece itself, it has a circle where you have to cut out. If you don't have that bar at the end of your belt buckle, you insert the prong of the belt buckle through that circle opening.
Back stitch.
Now we're going to make the holes on the belt flap to insert it through to catch the prong on the belt buckle. Only thing you have to do is take a pencil and make your markings through those circles. And that's when you're going to stamp your holes through so you can add your grommets. As you can see here, I ran out of my gold grommets, so I had to pick up and use my silver ones, but it did the job, so. Okay, to help close your skirt, You will need 4 to 5 hook and eyes with approximately a half an inch wide. Now it's time to attach the buttons and buttonholes. To find the buttonhole placements, just go back to pattern piece number 1 and mark your buttonholes on the edge of the center front of the bodice. So the last step is attaching your buttons to the center front of the bodice and also attaching your hook and eyes to the waistband of the skirt, and you'll be all done. I hope you enjoy putting this crazy cute top and pleated skirt together, and I can't wait to see your makes. Take care, guys. Bye!